Have you ever said something, maybe in a heated moment, maybe just even in passing, and immediately wish you could take your words back? That's what we're going to talk about today in James 3. Boy, we all know those moments where something just left your mouth, and whether it was intended or just something that popped out of your heart, it reveals something that's going on in your heart. And maybe you didn't want that on display, and we've all been there. And if you lived long enough, you probably know that the damage a careless word can do, to a friendship or marriage or reputation is far out of proportion of how small a thing it felt to say it. And James 3 is exactly about that. Hi, everyone. Jill from the North Woods. I hope you're enjoying this small step through the Bible, one chapter at a time. James isn't writing a self-help chapter on communication skills. He's writing to believers about the connection between the tongue and the soul, and how what we speak is revealing what we actually are. The chapter asks serious questions, and if you claim that you follow Jesus, what does your speech reveal about you? The first area is that he's warning, basically, this was an interesting word. It says, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers and sisters, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. And that's really kind of important. I was thinking about that really, throughout, we've heard this in other gospels and other places too. If you've been given a responsibility as a shepherd, as a teacher, you're going to be judged more, because I think there's a couple different reasons why. Is first of all, you're responsible for people. And if you say irresponsible things, and I think about all the, priests and pastors of the past who used the gospel in certain ways and they knew better and they taught their congregations differently. And that is problem with that because they're using their position in an exploitative method. But then also, I was thinking this as a secondary thing. I was attempting to take a nap this afternoon, which greatly failed. And I was thinking that part of it, too, is, do you know how many things I say? And I'm not saying I'm a teacher one way or the other, but I will tell you that James tells you that you should watch your tongue. And then if I don't watch my tongue, I can't say, well, I never really knew. I didn't really think about that, because I am on video telling you that's what it means. And so I think that there's also a greater chance of hypocrisy when the words come out of your mouth and then you still don't do them. And I have taken that to grave consideration as well. So he is opening this chapter with a warning, that would have been pretty deep to the Jewish Christian audience he was teaching to. Teaching is a position in high honor, both in the synagogue tradition. Synagogue teachers were considered to be wise and leaders of the church. And now in this very new early church, rabbis had huge influence over communities and understood what it meant to live out the scriptures. You saw what kind of position that people thought that when Jesus collected a group of people unto himself, this was not an uncommon action. There were many times a rabbi would gather a group of people, and there's many places in the Talmud where it talks about that. They would have students, and they have an impact on those students' lives. So this was a very important thing. And in early churches, remember, there's no buildings at this point. Mostly Christianity is either looked down upon or illegal. They gathered in homes or in meeting rooms, and that depended heavily on teachers, men and women who could open up the word and apply it to the lives, were often under real pressure. And I also thought it was interesting, too, because it does say men and women. So we're not talking about a pastoral position. We're talking about a teaching position. So let's keep that in mind as well. And when James says not many of you should become teachers, I think it's not discouraging people to step up and become spiritual leaders. That is always something that's needed greatly. I think he's issuing a warning of what comes with it. If you're a teacher, you bear a stricter judgment. Like I said, not merely because of the congregation you're supposed to help, but from God himself, who is going to look at that teacher more harshly. And like I said, some of it is because you have guidance ability, and part of it is you are literally saying the words of God. You can't just say, oh, I missed that part. You read that part out loud to other people. So teachers who handle the scripture carelessly, misapply the word, or say one thing and do another, that person is taken into heavier account because God knows their heart, and the heart knows that that person knew what it meant and told people the wrong thing anyway. And I think it's not meant to terrify someone who is a gifted teacher and wants to serve the church. It's meant to create, every teacher should have a healthy fear that God is going to keep them honest. And that's what James is saying. There's a widening frame here. He says that we've all stumbled in many ways. And so it's not, like I said, he's accusing them of anything. He's just saying we all have, including himself. And it's not also a defeatist, well, we just keep screwing up all the time. It's a statement of realism, and solidarity with the rest of his community, because he is including himself. A mature believer is not someone who never stumbles. It is someone who has learned, he says, to govern the tongue. This is going to be interesting. So there's some couple of different words in here. The word mature is teleos. I believe it's related to the word that is also meant for like talents or gifts. But basically, mature is basically something that is brought to its intended end. That person is capable of doing that. A mature person can do that. And when they do that, like I said, it's a sign of maturity. And James says that in speech, if you can control what you say, you control the whole self. The tongue is a testing ground of character. We think about it as, I'm just a hothead. I'm just a hothead, and, things just come flying out of my mouth. I'm not a hothead, by the way. We think of the tongue as like, it's loose, but, my heart's in the right position. My tongue has just gone astray. And what it's saying here is, no, the tongue is showing what the character and the heart has inside of it. And so then he gives these two illustrations of small things with great power. And he talks about it in terms of things that people would know in everyday life. He is a concrete earthly writer. He's from a particular period of time. And so he is thinking of things that would explain things to people who are right there in front of him. Not abstractions or deep philosophies, but things people would know. And here he reaches for two things that everyone in his audience would immediately know. A massive horse. Horses are big. If you never got to stand next to a horse, they're huge. They're a bit intimidating, and they're powerful animals. Left to their own selves, they can go wherever it wants to go. It has enough force to do harm to people, to things, to itself even. And yet you put a small bit, which is just a thing inside of its mouth, it doesn't hurt them. It allows the rider of the horse to have control over which direction the horse is going in. Now that small thing, little tiny thing, redirects an entire horse, an enormous creature. So then it talks about another analogy. Let's take a ship. James readers lived in the Mediterranean world. Cargo ships, vessels are a big part of it, cross open water. And the ship is capable of carrying hundreds of people it's being driven by the wind and the currents. And you might think, oh, well, a person couldn't control that. Look at the wind and the current. Those are big forces. But yet, a tiny rudder, it's not that tiny, but a rudder at the back of the ship would be able to determine where the ship goes. And the pilot who controls the rudder controls the entire voyage. And so the point is unmistakable here. Small things can govern great, mighty powers. The tongue is small. Physically speaking, it's like the smallest organ in the human body. And James says that it boasts of great things. And that phrase has an edge to it. That's not a good thing. The tongue just doesn't do great things. It brags about its own power. It is capable of setting enormous forces in motion with no friction at all. And a single sentence can change a life. A single rumor can ruin a reputation built over years. And a single word of encouragement spoken at the right moment can pull another person back from the edge of despair. And so the tongue is something powerful. But then he goes on to consider, he considers that a small fire that sets ablaze a whole forest. And I'm going to love nature analogies, but now we're talking about something else. If a bit and a rudder shows us how powerful the tongue is in comparison to the power of what words can do to people. Now we're going to show what fire can do. If you have an ungoverned tongue and it does what it wants to do, it means like it's setting fire. The fire was kind of a deliberated choice, again, in the Near East. If fire gets out of control, they didn't have fire trucks. It was a catastrophe. So a single little spark in dry brush could consume an entire hillside in hours. And so farmers, shepherds, and villagers understood what it meant to lose an entire season worth of crops, lose lives, a pasture, livelihood, every animal they owned, all because of someone just leaving us a careless flame around. And so that's where he's talking about is the tongue is capable of setting aside or setting on fire all sorts of things. The tongue is, he says, a world of unrighteousness placed among its members. And so what does that mean, that a tongue is a world of unrighteousness? It's not even just a small problem. It's a whole system of evil packed into a single organ. It defiles the whole body. It corrupts the whole course of a person's life. The Greek phrase here literally refers to the wheel of existence, the entire arc of life from birth to death. An unbridled tongue just doesn't isolate its damage. It can warp the entire trajectory of everything a person became. Like I said, you could destroy your life. You could destroy someone else's life. And it's important to understand the power of a tongue. And then, chillingly, James says that it was set on fire by hell, by Gehenna. Gehenna is the dumpster outside. I remember I saw Gehenna, where it was in Jerusalem. And it was this garbage pit that was on fire all the time, that just burns. And it was just nothingness. It was also meant to be like an image of the grave, but death itself. And so it's the same word that Jesus used when he spoke to put his final judgment on. James is drawing a direct line between careless and evil speech as the ultimate source of the powers of darkness. And so he makes a statement that might feel at first like despair. Well, no one can tame the tongue. Humans have whatever. They say what they say. Humans have domesticated animals of every kind who whole order of creatures bend to human mastery. We've been able to dominate the world of animals, through our own farming and agriculture. We have pets. I was thinking about all these different examples. But this small thing in our mouth is restless. It's full of evil. It can contain poisons. The restless word that is used here in Greek means unstable. It doesn't want to be settled down. It keeps moving and finding new ways to harm things. And this is what is being alluded to. James is not saying, give up, it's hopeless. James is just being honest that the depth of the problem, before he's going to point out the real answer to it, the tongue itself cannot tame itself. Human willpower alone is not sufficient. This is not a self-help book. This is a diagnosis that points us ourselves that we need something bigger, someone outside of ourselves to help us with this. And so when he goes on then and talks about, he says, the tongue, we bless our Lord and Father. We also curse people who are made in God's image. Boy, the same thing that comes out is a blessing and a curse. There's so many things in our society I was thinking about are like this, and we're going to talk about that. It's bringing back this practical and theological piece together. The same tongue we bless God with on Sunday mornings can say something devastating about another person by Sunday afternoon. And James finds this not just inconsistent, he also finds it cosmically wrong. It is because the curse of human being is to attack someone that's made in God's image. Every person, difficult ones, unlikable ones, hostile ones, broken ones, bear the image of God. The image of the living God is in that person. And when we use our tongue to degrade, dismiss, destroy another human being, we are, in a sense, splitting the direction of one who that image was made in. We bless God, and then we curse that person, and they have been made in God. Now, I want to be careful here to say that this isn't meaning that we should not say hard things. We're going to get to that in just a bit. Of course we speak the truth. Of course we try to correct people. Of course we try to follow the right path. But we know that there are ways you do that build people up, which is what Paul was saying his whole thing. And there are ways where you are denigrating one who is made in the image of God. And so James uses then 3 more images from nature to press this point. A spring, bubbling water out of the ground, doesn't produce both salt and fresh water. Its nature determines what flows from it. Okay, right? So if I see a bubbling brook of water there and it has fresh water in it, it shows you the nature of the spring. This is a fresh spring. If I'm by a seashore and I see water bubbling up from the ground and I drink from it and it has salt in it, that it determines its nature too. A fig tree doesn't grow olives. A grapevine doesn't produce figs. Everything in nature produces according to its kind. The inconsistency that James is describing is blessing God and then cursing people is unnatural, and it violates the logic and the creative order of things. If you are a bubbling brook and blessing God at one moment and then becoming salt water and cursing people at the next moment, there's something inside your internal spring that is cloudy, is bad. And so it's not about an argument about manners or social decorum. James is pressing on this question of what is actually happening in your heart. If a blessing and a curse are flowing from the very same source, what does it tell us about the source itself? Essentially, that your tongue has the ability to reveal what is inside of your heart. And it can, it shows. It's, they talked about what windows are the eyes of the soul because it's bringing things in. Well, this is the coming out. What's in here is coming out of the mouth. And so it's time to look at it. He doesn't really answer the question directly here, but he answers it is implicit in the thing. He says that the mouth reveals the heart. The heart divided itself, performing worship of God on one hand, and then curses upon a person on the other hand. It's that the heart is not fully transformed by the gospel, as it claims to be. You say you are. You say you believe certain things, and yet venom comes out of your mouth. What is in your heart? Venom is in your heart. So then it's going to go on and say that he's going to ask the question about who is wise and understanding. We're looking at this final section in James 3 that lifts up the discussion from the symptom, which is what comes out of your tongue, to a deeper question of the heart and what kind of wisdom governs it. He asks a really pointed question. Who among you is wise? Now, we've already learned that wisdom is something you can ask for. Remember, Solomon asked for it and gained it in abundance. James said that we can ask for it and gain it also in abundance. And his answer is not what his audience might have expected. Wisdom in this particular framework is not proven by impressive speech or sophisticated arguments. Think about the people who were at Mars Hill and the TED Talks of their era, saying all these deep philosophical things and wise statements and how you should live your life. That's not where wisdom is provided in speech. Instead, it's proved by the conduct. The kind of life that flows from a person over time, marked by what James calls the gentleness that comes from wisdom. That's right. You might think that when you're a wise person, that means I can put the smack down on you because I'm even more wise and I know how to be tricky with my words. Instead, wisdom makes me gentle. It makes me gentle. And so the word for gentleness in Greek is kind of a word that carries a sense of strength under control. So the idea is that you think of gentle people. And sometimes you might, and I can tell there are people in this society that think gentle people are weak. Throughout history, tyrants have found Christians weak because they don't use their full power. They don't reach out and grasp the dark side of the force, right? They are gentle, not because they could not be potentially destructive or have immense strength, but they take that strength and they put it under control. And that is a power of being disciplined rather than erased from the system entirely. People have denigrated Christianity as a weak faith because we don't take power in that sense. And instead, we have learned this Greek word of gentleness, which is strength under control. And against that, James sets up this contrasting picture of bitter envy and selfish ambition. The word that he uses for selfish ambition is someone working for hire, grinding away for personal gain without any concern for the larger community. In the political world of James' day, it carried a connotation of factional scheming, of a person using their words and influences not to build up, but to get ahead. They don't care about what's going on around them. They just want to get ahead. And that is that idea of it, of that selfish ambition. I don't care what it does. I don't care where it goes. I just care that I get ahead. And James calls that this kind of wisdom earthly, unspiritual. And that's a kind of a startling word. Then goes on to say it's demonic. The wisdom that is rooted in self-promotion, rivalry, envy doesn't just come from a weak human instinct. It originates from the spirit opposed to God. The fruits match the source, discord, and everyday evil practices. But the wisdom from above, in contrast, is described in this very beautiful sequence. It's pure. Its motives are not mixed or self-serving. It is peace-loving. It is not passive or conflict avoided, but it's oriented towards shalom, peace, the wholeness, the flourishing of peace, and it's gentle. It's a complement to reason and correction, and like I said, tampering your strength so you know where strength should be put out and where strength should be contained. It's not rigid or defensive, and it's full of mercy, the good fruits, unwavering, consistent, and that's the kind of thing you're looking for. Not looking for something that is hot and angry or cold and inconsiderate of the rest of the world, and without pretense, it says. And that's the same word that Paul used elsewhere. It's not unhypocritical love. It's sincere. What you see here is that you want it to be not hypocritical, like I said, but a sincere love. And what does sincere love do? It knows when to correct. It knows when to hug. It knows when to say something tough. And so then James closes this particular chapter, and like I said, these weren't chapters, so he wasn't closing anything, but with a statement saying that doubles back to everything he's saying, that the fruit of righteousness is sown by peace of those who cultivate peace. That is the kind of Christian life that produces lasting, real fruit. It's not the life of an aggressive self-promoter, a person who wins every argument, wins the day, made that person cry. What's the other thing on the internet? Slam dunk. There's another word. But anyway, the one whose tongue cuts, not the one whose tongue cuts the sharpest. It's the life of someone who has received wisdom from above, who speaks from the heart, that has been quieted and is gentle, control, shaped by God. The seeds are planted, of peace rather than a sparked fire. What I'm going to meditate about this week is this idea that James gives us a mirror that we can't look away from. None of us will come to the end of this chapter feeling clean. That's what I was saying. Like, if you teach this, you can't say, well, I guess I didn't really know what the Bible said about that. Instead, I think I do know because I'm telling you all this. And so that's where I feel a bigger burden on this. We will walk away from this feeling like we have lit fires in our past, that we have used our tongues in ways that were not helpful to other people. And it didn't bring light, it brought fire. And we've been blessed, with God who, I don't know, has seen us both when we have been blessing him and both when we are cursing other people, his image bearers, in frustration or in anger. And we've all felt that sort of selfish ambition that James describes, the desire to win, to be right at someone else's expense. And that chapter, doesn't end in condemnation. It ends with an invitation that there is wisdom that comes from above. And if a light produces the fruit of righteousness, the life that doesn't begin with trying harder to control your words. It begins with going back to the source. So you see, it's sort of backwards. Control your words and then you get closer with God. No. Get closer with God. It will help you control your words. God is asking us to come back to Him, to purify our spring, to give us a heart that only good water can flow from. When Martin Luther, in his reflections on James, pointed to this, that the tongue's problem is a heart problem. The heart problem has only one cure, and that's the grace of God, received in humility and lived out on dependence on Him. You can't tame your own tongue, but what you can do is you can bring your tongue to God and the heart that's behind it, are they connected? And give it to the one who can help you fix that. And what I'm going to pray about is the fact, I guess it's a word of confession, that there are words we've all spoken and I've spoken that are careless, selfish, out of envy or ambition or fear. And, I ask God to forgive me in that. We should ask God to forgive us all. Purify, that spring that's inside of us. Give us wisdom from above. And give us a pure, peace-loving, and mercy-filled spring that bubbles from us and bubbles out our mouth and reflects who we are. That's what we are. When we have words that hurt each other, we hope that we have the courage and the humility to go back and repair and make it right. And what I'm going to share with others, I think if this episode makes you think more carefully about how you use your words, especially in a world where we have more ways to speak than ever, I think share that with someone else. Send it to a friend that, could use that sort of thought about it. I think just pass it along. It helps, people get back into a pure spring with God. And if at the same time you want to just share this video or this podcast, hopefully that will help. It certainly helps me, but I hope it helps somebody else. You remember you can email me at jill@startwithsmallsteps.com. You can visit my website, jillfromthenorthwoods.com. It has all the different podcasts and videos I have. And I can't wait to see you in James 4.